Hello, everyone, and welcome to OU Uncensored, Ask a Professor. This is an event part of the Choose OU Spring Event Series hosted by Oglethorpe University's Office of Admission. Tonight, you'll hear from some of Oglethorpe's faculty members about why they love teaching at Oglethorpe and more about the classroom experience, so you and your family members can feel prepared to become story teachers this fall. We are happy to answer any questions you have, so please drop them in the chat or the Q&A box throughout the session. We'll do our best to answer them throughout the event tonight, but if your question isn't answered, please feel free to email it to us at admission@oglethorpe.edu. I'll drop that in the chat in just a second. We'd be happy to follow up with you any questions that we don't get to tonight. I'll start with some introductions. So I'll go first. My name is Debbie Aiken. I work in the Office of Admission as our Director of Admission Communication. I'm an OU alumna, and I have worked at Oglethorpe for about 8 years. And I'm also a Petrel parent. My daughter Jamie is a sophomore at Oglethorpe and an international studies major. So now I'll pass it over to Dr. Ruleson. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, happy to. I'm Mike Ruleson, professor of physics. I'm actually just finishing my 39th year here at Oglethorpe. And so besides physics and astronomy, I teach some math courses once in a while. And I'm also happen to also be the NCAA faculty athletic representative as well. So I love OU athletics as well.
Lynn, you want to go next?
Sure, Debbie, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Lynn Giger. I'm a professor of mathematics here. This is just finishing up my 19th year at Oglethorpe. In addition to kind of the regular mathematics courses that I teach in the cycle, I also regularly teach our core mathematics course called Math and Human Nature. All of our undergraduates take this course as part of their program, and I think it does a really wonderful job about talking about the philosophy behind mathematical thinking and not just mathematical procedures. How do you solve for X? We don't solve for X in that class.
Dr. Vaughn?
Okay, hello, I'm Morgan Vaughn. I teach chemistry here at Oglethorpe, and this is my second year. So short and sweet.
Hi, folks. My name is Brooke Base. This is my third year at Oglethorpe, and I am in the psychology department and teach many different courses in psychology across various levels of psych. And my sort of area of expertise is in memory. So I teach courses in sort of memory and cognition.
Great, thanks. So we'll start where it's most important, I guess. What do you all love teaching about at Oglethorpe? Why do you like teaching at Oglethorpe so much? And whoever wants to go first, feel free to take this question.
Okay, I'll take a shot. I guess evidently, since I've been here a long time, I must love it. And it's true that I do. To be honest, I came here right out of graduate school. This is my first teaching job, and I thought, well, I'll stay there for a year or so and get some experience and then move on. And here I am almost 4 decades later. So there must be something about it. And what it is, frankly, is the classroom experience that we have. Being able to, I myself went only to large state schools for my education, and it's a good education, no question about it, but it's not the same as the personalized sort of attention that you get when you have a small class, and you actually get to know your students, not just as students, but also as individuals, as young men and women, and so it's that really that has kept me here, and that makes me still love it after all this time. That and my colleagues, I should mention as well, because it's a wonderful faculty, and we interact with each other. We're not in our little silos of, I'm physics and you're something else, and I don't want to talk to you or have anything to do with you. There's a lot of interaction between the faculty as well. So it's just a really interesting and fun place to teach.
So Can I jump in next? So slightly different background experience from Dr. Ruleson. I went to a very small college like this one as an undergraduate. And then, as you go through graduate school, you'll usually go to larger and larger institutions. And that's exactly what happened. But I knew that I wanted to come back to a smaller school. And I remember discussing with my advisor that I wanted to be in a small liberal arts college because that had been a really important experience for me. But I wanted to also be in a larger city. So a place like Oglethorpe, that'd be great. And so imagine my wonderful surprise when the year that I was going on the job search that there was actually an opening at Oglethorpe. I feel really fortunate for that. And I was right in that a place like Oglethorpe would be really nice. It's been an excellent fit for me. There's things that you don't really know about why you teach the way you teach until you've been doing it for a while, I think sometimes. And one of the things that I've discovered is I don't like to lecture that much. So my classes tend to be, say it's an hour and a half long class. I'll lecture for maybe 30 minutes, and then the rest of the time is students spent working on problems together, and I'm floating around from table to table, helping them with that. And I know that there's just no way I could have developed that part of myself had I been at a larger institution where I had 200 students in a classroom. So that I feel really fortunate for that.
I'm going to jump in next because actually my, story of why I'm here at Oglethorpe is very similar to Dr. Giger's, that I also went to a small college and really loved the environment. And so, I did go to a larger university for graduate school for their research programs and everything, but I knew that I wanted to be at a small school like Oglethorpe. And also similarly, when talking, with friends and family and advisors and everything, as it got closer, I was like, Oglethorpe would be a really awesome place. That was kind of my a hopeful aspiration. And it just so happened that there was a job opening at the same time frame that I was looking for a job. So I also, kind of was hoping to work here at Oglethorpe, and that happened for me. The job opening was there. So I'm very happy about that. And I mean, I guess I also have the same reasonings for why I like teaching here at Oglethorpe, that I wanted to teach somewhere where teaching was the focus, that at large universities, oftentimes professors, their focus is really research, and they teach a course a year or something like that, right? And I wanted to go somewhere where teaching was really the focus, that I could really interact with my students in the classroom, get to know them. I also enjoy that I teach multiple levels of chemistry, so I can kind of see students as they progress and grow. And so that's what really drew me to Oglethorpe. And I must say that I'm really enjoying my time here. I've been here for only 2 years, but yeah, it's been a really great 2 years.
So I'll echo a lot of what Morgan just mentioned and say in my third year, I was drawn to Oglethorpe because I was definitely seeking out a more teaching focused position when I finished my graduate studies. I went to large schools. I did not have a small liberal arts school experience as an undergraduate student, but just knew that teaching was really where I wanted my energy to go. And I do enjoy research. I still remain active in research, but I didn't want that to be sort of, I wanted teaching to really be the main focus of my position. So Oglethorpe allows me to do that. And keeping classroom sizes small is really nice because it really does allow me to teach in ways that I enjoy teaching. Less lecture heavy and more hands-on types of learning. Allowing students to get involved in research projects early in their majors is really, really nice because we get to know students really well. And we also advise our students, which I think is really nice. So we really do form really nice relationships that last, multiple years. So we get to know them really well. So yeah, I think it's my third year and I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Brooke. You brought up a point that I'd love for you all to elaborate on a little bit. So we know that a lot of students choose Oglethorpe because of the class sizes. That's often a big part of the decision. And we talk about that, you know, we don't have any big lecture halls. Students are in small class sizes where they get to know their professors really well, and that hands-on learning that you mentioned, Dr. Base. So if you all could talk about what does that look like in your classroom? If you're not lecturing, then what are students doing and how are they, what's your approach to helping them grasp the material?
I can go first if you want, since I mentioned it. So, you know, that will vary based on the course that I'm actually teaching. But as an example, in our research methods course sequence, we keep really small class sizes so that we're allowed to, or we're able to have students actually conduct research projects where they, you know, formulate testable questions and they actually collect data by working with participants and analyze data and write up data. And they do that multiple times through the major in psychology, which is really a wonderful way to learn how to actually do science and psychology. And we're really able to do that because we can keep our class sizes small enough that faculty can manage the oversight of that many projects sort of happening simultaneously. So I think that's a really nice example of sort of top-notch hands-on learning that we're able to accomplish in our classes. In other courses that are a little bit larger than our methods courses, so for example, like a course in cognitive psychology, I'm still able to let students do you know, research proposals or write extensively on an area of cognitive psychology that they're interested in, because it's still a small enough classroom and I can give them that sort of more of an individualized assessment experience. And it's not just all exam based, if that makes any sense.
I'll jump on there as well. I had mentioned how, you know, I only like to lecture for maybe about 30 minutes of an hour and a half long class, and then students are working on problems together. And you're thinking, well, if everybody's sitting at individual desks, then really they just all be working problems alone. It's not the way that the room is designed, though. The room is built with round tables. It's a very large room, so you can move those tables all around, and all of the walls are whiteboards, so there's not really a front of the room and a back of the room. Try to make it really flexible. Oh, and the tables themselves are whiteboards. So most students show up to class with whiteboard markers and they really do work on the problems together in the middle of the table. It's really fun to watch because they will pretty quickly figure out that they're not stuck to their chair, that they can get up and move around and talk with people, because I certainly want them to do that. I want them to form those connections with each other as well as the connections with the material.
Yeah, I can jump in next. And I think for me, it does depend on the class as to how I organize things. And there's also, at least in most of the science courses, you have sort of a classroom portion where you're really focused on the theories and why and how things work, and you do problem solving there. But then we also have a lab portion where you go into a physical laboratory space, and you get to mix different chemicals together, use instrumentation, those kinds of things for really hands-on. So in the classroom environment, I like to introduce a topic to students and then have them work on problem solving with that topic in groups. And again, so this idea of not really lecturing the whole time, I introduce the topic, they work on problems as a group, and I go around and answer questions, and then we'll talk about it as a class. And so that's kind of how I tend to run the classroom portion. And then the lab portion, again, that's very much hands-on because the students are, in the laboratory doing the different pieces, mixing things together, taking data. But one of my favorite, sequences that I do is in my quantitative analysis class. So this is a class where the whole focus is trying to answer the question, how much of this chemical is in this blank? And so the first half of the semester, we used we have a set of labs that are focused on different techniques. So some of the questions that we answered was how much caffeine is in Mountain Dew? How much sulfur is in fertilizer? So different questions like that. And then for the second half of the semester, after students have been introduced to these techniques, they get to design their own experiments to figure out, what chemical they're interested in studying and in what substance. So this year I had one group was interested in looking at the amount of hyaluronic acid in lotion. So it's, a lot of fancy lotions have hyaluronic acid in it. Another year, some students were interested in the benzoic acid content in Joule pods. And so this is a place where students get to be really creative and design their own projects for the second half of the semester. And again, this is something that it would be quite hard to manage if we were at a larger institution, because I cannot imagine trying to keep up with all of the different, all of the different projects and the different instrumentation and chemicals and equipment that they need. But it's something that I really enjoy getting to do with my students.
I just echo what a couple of the other folks said, that it depends on the class very much. We're fortunate that in the sciences that we've just moved in last year to a new science building. And at least in physics, we teach our classes in the laboratory almost completely. So like Dr. Giger, I at most can stand to maybe lecture for a half an hour or so. But then I have students work on questions together. And sometimes in the process of doing that, a question will come up from a group, well, what if? And so usually what happens is we pull some stuff out of the drawers and we, if it's a circuit, we build it and we see what happens. And so there's not really a division between lecture and laboratory a lot of times. On the other hand, one of the other courses that I teach is our fourth year core course, Science and Human Nature, that all students take. And that's a real treat, I have to tell you, to teach that course, because we get in that course, we get these students when they're seniors. They know a lot, and it's really interesting because I never know on any given day when I go into that class, I have no clue of what's going to happen. I have an idea in my head of where I'd like to go, but usually within 10 or 15 minutes, we've gone off in some direction because of questions that students ask. So a lot of times it's almost exclusively discussion, not just me talking at them, but them talking to each other and to me. So it's a treat to be able to teach those courses in the way that really is, I think, the most effective way for people to learn the subject.
I'm glad you brought up the core because it's something I wanted to make sure we talked about tonight. We've already got a question about it in the chat. So everyone, core, for those not familiar, is Oglethorpe's unique approach to general education, which is a intentionally sequenced group of 9 courses that students take the whole time they're at Oglethorpe. So pretty much every semester they're enrolled, they're taking at least one core class. So I'd be curious to hear how some of you describe the core. That's how I describe it. But how do you describe the core and what makes it special, and how your division goes about teaching the core? And I know, Dr. Giger, within the past couple of years, you've kind of revamped the math or have a different approach to teaching the math course. And that was specifically what we got a question about, what the syllabus looks like, and if someone's not a math expert, what can they expect in that course?
Sure, I'll jump in on that. It's the first day of that class and students are asking me those exact kinds of things. So I'm not a math person. Am I going to be able to do okay here? But before I talk about that, though, kind of my take on what the core curriculum is about is each one of the courses is talking about some way of viewing the human experience. So the human experience through science, through mathematics, through music or art or history, or through self-reflection, through narrative. And so when I talk about that with my students on the first day of the math core class, one of the questions that I like to lead with is, what does a mathematician mean when a mathematician says something is true? And that becomes something that cuts through the entire course. Now, again, that can sound a little bit scary if you don't think of yourself as a math person, but it actually opens up a lot of opportunities for exploration. Things like, one of the questions that we discuss is mathematics invented or discovered? This is a long-going debate in mathematical philosophy. You know, do mathematical objects exist outside of the human brain, or are they a product of our own creation and imagination? And if you take the second route, that mathematical concepts are a project or a product of human imagination, then the things that we have invented, we can change. So then I can start asking questions like, well, what would happen if you weren't drawing a triangle on a flat surface, like a piece of paper on a table, but what would it look like if you drew a triangle on something that was round? So what would happen if the number 2 just didn't exist anymore? and these become ways in which the students can become participants in creation of a mathematical idea, not just being told, oh, this is the way that you go through these steps and do this recipe and you solve for X. Again, I think it gives them a much more flexible approach to the human experience of creating mathematics. I'm kind of nerding out about that, sorry.
Anyone else want to chime in about core in your division and what it means for your students and what they can expect?
Sure, I'll say a bit about Core 400, Science and Human Nature. Like I said, it's you never know what's going to happen, but the way that we've structured that course is there's a common theme across all sections, regardless of who you would take the course from, that we want to look at questions like, first of all, how is science done? What are the standards of evidence that are sort of required for something to be accepted as scientifically valid? Even more basically, what is science? How does it differ from other areas and other ways of knowing things? But then each section, each different instructor is able to use whatever context they want to use as a vehicle for looking at those questions. So in my section, I look at cosmology, the history of cosmological thought, starting all the way back with the ancients, when they answered questions about their place in the universe by constructing myths. And then we go all the way up until modern Big Bang sort of cosmology, the very bleeding edge, cutting edge cosmology that's being done today. And along the way, the point is to try and illustrate these ideas about how what we regard as sufficient evidence to change the way that we think about something, that has not always been the same. It's different today than it was in the 14th century or in the before the Christian era, for example. So these big questions, can be investigated. Much as Dr. Giger said, the students really become interested in what is science? It's the same question. Is it out there to be discovered, and all we're doing is discovering it, or is science a way that we've created to make sense of the universe? Is it a construction? It's a human construction, and get some pretty heated debates about those sorts of questions. So it's a lot of fun.
Thank you for that. It sounds fun. We got a question in the chat about research, and we're STEM heavy with our faculty panel. tonight. I think we're missing biology, which is what the question specifically is about. But if you can talk a little bit about undergraduate research opportunities for students and how the thought and the planning that went into our new Cousins Center for Science and Innovation and the resources that are now in there available to students. The question is specifically how easy is it for students to participate in research, or is it more of a selective program?
Morgan, do you want to take that one to start with? And
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with that one. So I would say, I guess let me frame this a little bit to give you some background on where we're coming from and how we're handling research. So often when we're talking about research, usually professors will have their own research projects and students will work on it. And the way it works at a lot of universities is that students who are interested in research go to the professor who they would like to work with, and they knock on their door and they say, I'm interested in research, can I work with you? And sometimes the professor says yes, sometimes they say no. And in some ways, this sounds like it would work fairly well, but it's actually pretty limiting because what if the professor that you had for your introductory courses didn't do the kind of research that you were interested in? Would you know about the other kind of research that was happening, other areas of research? And also, if you didn't know that that's how it usually worked, that the student had to go knocking on doors to try to find a research position, a lot of students don't realize that that's how it works at a lot of places, and they wouldn't know to go knocking on doors. So at Oglethorpe, this is something that we've developed fairly recently, but we have what we call the Science Research Review Committee, and I'm one of the members on that. And the idea of that is to advertise research positions. Now, this is specifically in the sciences, but there is a lot of other what's the word I'm looking for? There is other opportunities that are being developed as well for outside of the science. I know that it's something that Oglethorpe is really interested in, and putting funding towards having all of these research opportunities. But again, specifically for the sciences, this committee will advertise positions at Oglethorpe with Oglethorpe faculty that are looking to have additional students working with them, as well as opportunities that Oglethorpe we learn about that our students are eligible for. So oftentimes there are programs elsewhere where we'll get sent advertisements that we can send along to our students as well. So the way this works is that we put out a call for applications, and then students can apply to work with professors that they're interested in. And so usually the application is a cover letter and a CV and maybe a short statement of why you're interested in working there, which often is kind of included in the cover letter. And so these are things that we really want students to practice anyways, right? That this is, to get into grad school or applying for jobs, those kinds of skills are really important. So it gives you a chance to practice that. But then it also makes it a bit more of a level playing field in having more students do research. So I think, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers for this year, but I think we had about 15 students apply for research this semester. And we were able to place 14 of them. And so we are continuing to grow the amount of research. But I would say that, if you're interested, it's very likely that you'll be able to participate in research with one of the science faculty members while you're here. Yeah.
I'll add a couple of things. I mentioned that we're in a new science building, and a couple of years of planning actually went into that. And one of the main things that we tried to do in planning for the construction of this was to make sure that there was dedicated student research space that was available in one way or another. And I think it'd be fair to say that at least the science faculty and the faculty more broadly, but I can speak to the science faculty, we're all very much dedicated to the idea that of undergraduate student research. It's how you really learn, you know, what the practice of your particular field is like, and it stimulates interest as well on the part of students in their coursework, because if you're just taking courses as an undergraduate working toward, oh, maybe I can go into graduate school and finally do some research, that's a tough row to hoe. But if you're able to actually get your hands in there and be doing some research as an undergraduate while you're taking the courses that you know, help prepare you for, you know, more advanced research later, I think it's much more exciting for students. It really tends to maintain their motivation for what they're doing.
Sorry, Brooke, I was just going to say one more thing, which is that the process that I was talking about was for, I guess, independent student research with another faculty member, but I did want to point out that many of our courses have research embedded within them, like the example that I talked about before with the quantification project that I have my students do. Okay, sorry, Brooke, I just wanted to jump in and mention.
Totally fine. I was just going to mention that also Oglethorpe holds a symposium every year to allow students to share research projects. And these could be class-based research projects or independent research projects that they've worked on with faculty. And they get to present their research in sort of a conference style setting on campus, and they can present their research in multiple modalities. So it gives them really nice experience for what it would be like to submit to professional conferences, and then also actually presenting research and data at conferences. So I think it's a really wonderful way. And it allows students to find out what other people are doing on campus across disciplines. So I find it to be a really, it's a wonderful thing that they do there.
Thank you, Dr. Base, for mentioning that. And I will drop that link in the chat here in just a second if people would like to explore. One of the benefits of everything being remote this year is that these things are available to everybody. So typically in the past, Liberal Arts and Sciences Symposium is kind of a day where no classes are held, and students get the day off to listen to their fellow students share their work, whether it be you know, English honors thesis, or some physics or chemistry research. So really cool opportunity for students to see what other students are doing across campus. And this year it's all available via Zoom virtually. So I'll put that link in the chat just a sec so you guys can explore the schedule. It's coming up. Hopefully we haven't missed it yet. Oh, good. It's coming up at the end of this month. Good. So, and then, okay, great. So we have, we're STEM, we have a lot of STEM faculty here tonight. We've got psychology, math, physics, and chemistry. So I'd like if you guys could tell folks a little bit about the benefit, like why liberal arts? What's the benefit of studying these topics at a liberal arts institution? People don't often equate the subjects that you teach with going to a small private liberal arts college. So what's the benefit to students to doing that?
I'll start. One of the other hats I wear is I'm the dual degree engineering coordinator. So we have a dual degree program in engineering with Georgia Tech and Auburn and Kennesaw and a couple of other places. And that may seem unconnected to the question, but here's my point. Students who follow that program, they do 3 years here at Oglethorpe, getting their basic math and science and their liberal arts, their core courses accomplished, and then they move on to an engineering school for an additional couple of years to complete their engineering work. And we've had this program for a long time, and so many of the people that went through it when I first came here are now, well into their careers. And it turns out that those students do remarkably well, not just as engineers, but they tend to move up in their engineering firms and take leadership positions. And I don't think that that's accidental. The reason is because one of the things that you learn, even if you're in the sciences and the quantitative area, one of the things you learn at Oglethorpe is how to write well, how to speak well, how to argue, how to make an argument. And those are things that you just don't get any place but really a liberal arts institution. So yes, we're largely STEM folks. We love research. We're nerds. We love numbers and stuff like that. But we also realize the benefit of for students this broader exposure that our core, for example, provides. And it, as I said, I've seen enough. I've had enough experience, particularly with the program that I mentioned. But it's generally true that our students just really do well. They're very successful in their careers, and I don't think that that's an accident. I think it's largely a consequence of the breadth of education that one gets here.
So, and I would add on to that I think one of the things that we have as a benefit of being at a smaller liberal arts college is the ability to explore multiple areas of interest, that you don't have to pick just one thing. You don't have to just be a math person or just be a physics person. My undergraduate degree, I had a second major in music. And so that was something I'm not sure that I would have been able to do if I hadn't been at a smaller liberal arts college. And so we find a lot of our students they take a class through the core and go, that was really cool. And now I want to take another class later on in that same subject area, just for fun. And that is something that we really encourage. I will add one other little side story onto what Dr. Ruleson had said about advancing through the career. A cousin of mine who was an executive in a large national bank, they were having some problems with retention of recent hires. And so all of these, big wigs in this bank are sitting around a table talking about, it's like, well, what is it that we need to be looking for in the current graduate? And finally, my cousin says, well, what did you major in? And they all started going around the table saying what they majored in. And it was like English, history, art, music. Every one of those the people at the table at the upper echelons of this bank had majored in a liberal arts discipline, which I think that says a lot about the role that the liberal arts can have in preparing students for the workforce.
I would just add to what Dr. Giger said, not to mention the flexibility that it provides one with, because it's not news to anyone that people these days rarely stay in a single job or career for their entire working life. There's a lot of moving between different positions, different steps within one's career. And I think the flexibility that you develop in a liberal arts education enables one to, be responsive to the way the workforce works these days.
Thank you all for those wonderful answers. Oh, Dr. Base, were you going to add something? We'd love to hear from you.
Oh, just a small thing. Kind of pulling off something that Morgan had mentioned earlier about the ability to see students across different levels of coursework. So you get them an intro, and then you get them again, in a methods course, then you get them again in an upper level course. And it's really nice because then when you get to know them well enough that they feel really comfortable asking you questions about, career-oriented things. And then you can really write nice recommendation letters for them as well, depending on what they're choosing to do, because you've seen them across these different layers of their education. And I think that can be really helpful too.
Thank you. Since we are approaching the end of the semester, we've got about a month left in classes here. I'm curious to know if you all could just tell us what's going on in your classroom right now. What are you working on? What are the students stressing about as the semester comes to an end? And yeah, just kind of give people a sneak peek inside your class right now.
Well, I gave a test this morning in college physics.
I know you did, Dr. Ruleson.
Over electric fields, and it was challenging, but no, the students did well. Another class that I'm teaching this semester is quantum mechanics, and we're talking about quantum entanglement and quantum cryptography and quantum computing. Students are really pumped about that. They're very excited about it. It's the cool, sexy stuff, having to do with quantum mechanics. And let's see, in my Core 400 course, we're actually have been talking about Isaac Newton and Rene Descartes and how they fed off each other. In some cases, kind of hated each other. So it's all interesting at this point.
So one of the reasons that I said that I knew that Dr. Ruleson had given a test this morning is that Dr. Ruleson and I share almost the entire cohort of students. I'm teaching Calculus 2 this semester to the same group of students with whom he's teaching college physics. So we really get to know these students across multiple disciplines, and we get to talk with each other about how they're doing. So my students were asking for lots of extensions on their quiz that was due today, which is, again, why I knew that they had a physics test today.
So sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. I build in lots of small assignments into my course. So students are turning in a small thing every day, but they can ask for extensions a certain number of times during the semester. When things start to pile up a little bit, they can take a little bit of a breather. I said that is a Calculus 2 course, and we're right now going through advanced techniques of integration, which those tend to be fairly complex, and so students are starting to worry that they might not be able to remember them all. And yet I'll see them in office hours and they'll come and ask me questions, and they're clearly getting so much more comfortable with something that a month ago they thought they would never master. And now they think that thing they learned a month ago is so easy. Why can't we just do more problems like that? And I also teach a course in applied calculus that's largely for economics majors. And the topic that we're addressing right now is optimization with a constraint. Now, again, that sounds really technical, but from an economics point of view, it's, say, for example, you have a budget that you can distribute between labor and capital in order to produce your good, and you would like to be able to allocate that budget in a way that's going to allow you to produce the most, get the most bang for the buck, so to speak. And it's one of the more challenging topics in that course, but it's also one of the most practical. And so students walk away from that day usually feeling like, oh, that's why y'all made me take this course.
Okay, I can talk next. So for my quantitative analysis course, my students have actually just wrapped up, or they're finishing up their quantification projects. So that one was a really fun one. I would say that my students had to do a lot of troubleshooting, which is very common when you're doing research. You make a plan and then it doesn't go according to plan, and you have to, kind of rework your approach. So that's been really a lot of fun, and my students are getting ready to prepare posters for the symposium that we talked about earlier. And then in the kind of classroom portion of that, my quantitative analysis class, we're talking about spectroscopy and using spectroscopy to analyze samples. So spectroscopy is like the basic idea is you shine light on a sample, and then you look at the light that goes through the sample. And, depending on different arrangements and what type of sample you have and the resulting light that you get, you can learn a whole lot about the chemicals that you're analyzing. And so it's one of my favorite areas of chemistry to talk about. And then I just feel really lucky right now because I'm talking about some of my favorite topics of chemistry for my quantification class, but also my general chemistry class. We're talking about thermodynamics. And it's been really fun because we've been able to talk about thermodynamics and introduce it in the chemistry sense of things. But then I've also been pulling in biology examples to show them, a lot of students taking general chemistry are biology students. And so whenever I can pull in that, or, maybe some engineering students pull in these examples to show them that there's a reason why we're asking you to take chemistry, even though you're not a chemistry major, is just really fun. So.
Hi, so I'll just share, I'm teaching advanced experimental psychology this semester, which is essentially the third course in a 3-course research methods sequence. And all the students in this course are able to design and then implement their own research studies. And it's been really fun. I've enjoyed it a lot. This is the first time I've taught it. And we're currently getting IRB approval for all of our studies, which basically means the students have designed them and created all of their materials, and they're getting sort of approval from a committee that's housed at Oglethorpe to say that, their procedures are ethical and they can work with human participants. And so they're going to be collecting data in the coming weeks, and then we'll get to actually process that data and they'll be writing it up. So that's been a really fun class.
Thank you all for that. We did get a question about the math placement exam. And I put a link in the chat that leads to the page on our website that has the instructions for it. But Dr. Giger, if you'd like to talk about how that's used to assess where students land.
Yeah, I'll just talk briefly about that. I mean, obviously the main reason why one would take a placement exam is to make sure that we're getting you into courses where you're the most likely to be successful. In terms of mathematics, that's really trying to determine whether a first-year student is ready to start with Calculus 1, or if they would benefit by having one of our courses before calculus prior to taking that class. Now, the math placement exam is one way in which we make that determination, but there's other pieces of information that we factor in as well. If you have taken an AP course in calculus and you may have scored well on the AP exam, but you don't want to use it for AP credit, that would be still evidence that you are ready to go into a college calculus course. So we do try to take a holistic approach to math placement. So we recommend that you take the math placement exam, but there's also more pieces of information besides just that one score that we're using to make our recommendation about what you take next.
Thank you. And the link that I shared, it basically about 2 weeks after you send in your enrollment deposit, you'll get information about setting up your Oglethorpe email, and all that has to be set up before you can take the placement exam. So we've got time to figure that out. So I'd like to ask you all about internship opportunities within that maybe your students have done recently, or ways that you work with students to help them learn about or find internship opportunities. That's another big thing that often comes up with incoming students. It's at the top of their list of things that they want to do is complete some internships. So anything you can share from your area about those opportunities for students.
I'll share. So we have a number of students that do complete internships for course credit through the psychology department. And oftentimes students will work in local organizations, for example, the Marcus Institute, which is a wonderful place where students can work and assist in different types of therapies for children that are receiving therapies for neurodiverse conditions or other sort of working with them individually to help them adjust to different environments that they may find challenging. So we have a number of students that do internships at the Marcus Institute. We also are able to place students at times in research experiences through other universities. That's more of a sort of academic research type of an internship. And then oftentimes students work with Aaron Sherrill through career services or through the A Lab, and they're able to secure internships that way. So being positioned in Atlanta is really beneficial for finding those internships. It's really an advantage of, small liberal arts colleges are often not in cities. Sometimes they're in more rural environments, and that's really an advantage of Oglethorpe, I think.
Yeah, I would echo what Dr. Base said about using the A-Lab and the Career Services Office. They maintain in the sciences and in engineering area, particularly a list of firms around town that are usually willing to take on interns. So we routinely have students from physics and engineering that work with places like electromagnetic sciences and some of the other engineering sort of firms that are out in Gwinnett County, sort of the technology park area. So there's lots of things available. It just takes a little bit of initiative on the part of the student to make contact with the Career Services Office, and they'll work with students to find something that fits what their desire is as far as internships go.
I also wanted to mention that the A-Lab and Career Services, they have a website called Handshake, where they can post where different businesses and other organizations that have internship positions, they will, advertise them and let Oglethorpe know that they have these positions available. And Oglethorpe collects that information and has basically, it's kind of like job listings, but for internships. And so all students have access to this website, Handshake, that Oglethorpe runs an account specifically for Oglethorpe. And that's a nice to take a look at, see what's available and where organizations are looking for somebody to intern.
And I'll throw one more thing on there, since we were talking a lot about the A-Lab, that one of the arms of the A-Lab is the Academic Success Center. So one of the things that students have as an opportunity to do for work experience, but not necessarily outside of the campus, is to serve as a supplemental instructor. So I have a graduating senior mathematics major who's been serving as my supplemental instructor since last fall. He was a former student of mine his freshman and sophomore year. And for students who are considering possibly going into graduate school in a field like mathematics, the opportunity to be able to put their instructional skills into practice while they are still undergraduates is invaluable. This particular student who's working with me this year took his experience as a supplemental instructor and used it to get a job with a Teach for America-like program within the Memphis Public Schools. So it was a great opportunity for him, and I'm so glad that that worked out.
Thank you. Great. You guys are touching on a lot of great stuff, and I'm filling the chat with lots of links. So I hope our attendees are looking there. Lots of good resources. We've got just about 5 minutes left here. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in there. But if we could close out with any advice you have. Students are, as you know, have a mix of emotions as they enter their first year of college. They're excited and they're nervous, understandably. So, what advice do you have that for them as they prepare to start their college journey this fall?
My advice is that students often, I think, are hesitant, understandably, to approach their instructors and use office hours and so on. And very often it takes a year almost before some students will be willing to knock on a professor's door. And I would just strongly encourage you to not do that, to utilize your instructors. I mean, that's what you're here for. Utilize your instructors from the very beginning. We love it when students come to office hours. It's disappointing when you're sitting there with your door open, office hours, and nobody's showing up. It's like, so that would be my advice. It's one of the advantages of being at a small institution. You don't have to necessarily make a reservation a week ahead to see your instructor. You can just walk up to their office, and more than likely, they're going to be accessible to you. So that would be my very strong advice.
If you come to my office hours, I'll probably offer you a cup of tea. I will say, in addition to that, this is echoing off Dr. Ruleson. My favorite parts of my job are those interactions that happen outside of class. And I know that for freshmen, those are hard to initiate that first time, but just to know how much that we are enjoying our job when you come by or you see us on the quad and you ask a question. Again, this is the reason why we do this. And so we're very, very happy to have you there, not just in that 90-minute time slot 2 days a week. We really want to get to see you outside of that, because that's when we really get to know you, not just as a student, but as a person.
I mean, you guys already said everything that I was thinking of saying, because I was also thinking, please come talk to your professors. We want to get to know you, want to help you. Like everyone's been saying, that's one of my favorite parts of my job, is getting to talk to students one-on-one. So yeah, I don't know that I have too much more to add.
Just strongly echo what my colleagues are saying about getting to know your professors early. And then I would say, honestly, too, maybe take a class early in your career that maybe is a little outside of your comfort zone. You're not quite sure you would have liked it. Since you are in really small classes and you have great access to professors, it might be a nice way to explore something new that you think you might enjoy, but you're just not sure. So I would tell students to try out something new early in their coursework if they can.
Great, thanks. It looks like we got 2 final questions. One of them I was frantically searching for on the website. I don't know that I have this number. What percentage of our faculty are full-time? So unless one of you know that, we can look it up and get back to the person who asked that question. I know it's a lot. It would be a high percentage? I'm not sure. Yeah, so we'll have to look that one up and get back to you. And then the last question we got is a really great one to end on, I think. It's a question about, let's see, what do teachers look for from students? Do you look for creativity and different perspectives on assignments, or are you looking for them to give the right answer? And of course, that will vary by subject, and course. There are sometimes where there is one correct answer. But if you all, if anybody would like to speak to the discussion-based classes that we have and the opportunities that students have to learn from one another as much as they do from our faculty members, and how we value the diversity of thought within the classroom. If anybody would like to speak to that.
I love that question. You're quite right. I mean, in some of the classes, there is a right answer, but particularly in the core 400 class that I've mentioned a couple times, one of the things that it explicitly is in my prompts that I give for papers that students write is that there is no right answer to this question. I tell them straight out that there is no right answer. But what I want them to do is to make an argument and to support it with evidence. And it's really interesting, the responses you get. So yeah, I think in answer to your question, sometimes creativity and looking at things from a variety of perspectives is very strongly encouraged. But there are some places where there are right and wrong answers. I got to be honest about that too.
Yeah, I'll jump on that one because people will always talk about mathematics. It's like, well, 2 + 2 is 4, no matter what. So there's going to be a right answer there. But one of the things that I try to do in my class is not to plan out the path that you're going to get to that answer every single time. It's kind of start off with a question and then just throw out to the class like, well, so what should we do here? It's like, tell me a next move that we could take. You don't have to know how to get all the way to a conclusion. Just what would be a reasonable next thing to try? And usually there's multiple directions where that could go, and students often surprise me with something that they propose. And we end up solving a problem in a way that I just hadn't anticipated. And that's really fun when that happens.
Any other final thoughts? This has been a great panel. Thank you all to our faculty for joining us here tonight. Thank you to our attendees for coming as well. This session is recorded, so we'll have the recording up online fairly soon. If we didn't get to your question or you didn't want to put it in the chat, feel free to send it to us at admission@oglethorpe.edu and we will get back to you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.